Today we dive into the fascinating and controversial world of the Nation of Yahweh, a group founded by the charismatic and enigmatic Yahweh ben Yahweh in the 1970s. With its roots in the struggle for racial identity and spiritual empowerment, the Nation of Yahweh presents a complex tapestry of beliefs, practices, societal impacts. From its bold claims of divine ancestry to the controversies surrounding its leadership, this organization has captured both intrigue and scrutiny. Join us as we uncover the history, teachings, and cultural significance of the Nation of Yahweh and what it reveals about the search for identity in America today. I'm Sammy.
And I'm Nicole.
And we are Spooky Sleuths.
Hey guys.
Hello.
Welcome back. It's been a minute since we've been able to talk about a cult.
I know, we were so entrenched in spooky season, and then we had that great interview for you last week. Thank you so much, Carrie, again, for sitting down with us. If you didn't watch that interview, please do. It was really great to sit down and talk about Billie Holiday and all the shenanigans there.
Right? It was wild. But now Sammy's going to tell us all about Yahweh ben Yahweh, which just sounds made up.
It does. Well, a man named Yahweh ben Yahweh is at the center of it all. He was born Hulon Mitchell Jr. in 1935.
That doesn't even sound anything remotely like...
No, but
like somebody that should rename himself to Yahweh ben Yahweh.
Right. He was born as one of 15 children to an Oklahoma Pentecostal preacher as a father. His family was deeply religious, and religion surrounded his entire life.
Don't they usually?
Yes.
Are cult leaders?
When Yahweh grew up, he joined the Air Force, and then he attended law school. After he graduated, he settled in Atlanta. And this is where he started to go a little bit off the rails. When he got to Atlanta, he decided to join the Nation of Islam. The Nation of Islam is not the same as the Islamic State, but it is classified as a religious organization focused on Black nationalism and African diaspora. African diaspora is the worldwide collection of communities that descended from the people of Africa.
Oh, okay.
While in the Nation of Islam, he changed his name to Hulon X.
Like Malcolm X?
That's kind of what I was thinking. He spent most of the 1960s as an active member of the group, but ended up leaving to become a faith-healing Christian preacher. Now, his name at this time was Father Mitchell. He decided it was time to move to Miami, Florida in 1978, and here is where the Nation of Yahweh was born.
Why is it always Florida?
I don't know. Florida and Atlanta, those southern states.
They like their cults, and that's where serial killers like to go.
When he got to Miami, Yahweh recruited members of the Black Hebrew Israelite community to begin following him.
That's very niche.
It is. The group was technically classified as a branch of the Black Hebrew Israelite movement, but his teachings did not align with other congregations.
So he had to get his own sect together.
Right. Yahweh preached that the belief that God and all of the prophets of the Bible were Black. He also preached that the Blacks would gain the knowledge of their true history only through him and his teachings.
Why does everyone always make it about race?
I don't know.
In instances when it doesn't even make sense.
Well, during this time, and we'll talk about it a little later on, the time was really centered on Black people finding their identity and thriving. I think this was the 70s,
So it was after desegregation?
Right.
So there's, okay. All right, I kind of get it then, but still.
Yes. This was a very Black supremacy focused group, teaching that
Which is different than just finding yourself.
Yes. He taught that white people and Jewish people were infidels and oppressors. Yahweh was very active in the Miami community. He was recognized as a businessman and gave back to the community. From turning hotels into schools and grocery stores to cleaning up rundown apartments, he was leaving a positive mark on his community. The group was cleaning up the ghetto, as one former member said. So much so that Miami's mayor at the time, Xavier Suarez, dedicated a day to him called Yahweh ben Yahweh Day on October 7th, 1990. That former group member described their public reputation as, "We were like the mafia. If you understand who the mafia is, you know not to mess with them." Before we get too much farther, let's talk about the name Yahweh. Yahweh was an ancient Leviathan deity. He was a national god of Israel and Judah, but later god of Judaism and the Abrahamic religions. This god has been worshipped way back to the Bronze Age, which was like 3300 to 1200 BC.
Yeah.
So a very old deity. He has the attributes related to weather and war deities, but later he was considered the creator and sole god to be worshipped. If this doesn't tell you all you need to know about who Yahweh ben Yahweh was, I don't know how I can make it any clearer.
He has Yahweh in his name twice. So not only does he think he's like the one,
Yahweh,
he's the one twice.
Well, and that means Yahweh, son of Yahweh. Ben means son of. So he thought of himself as God. And this is different from other cults because they typically preach that they're the prophet or the second coming of Jesus. Not too many believe that they are God themselves. Some do. And we've talked about at least one or two of those. But typically, they're a prophet. They're a reincarnation of Jesus.
They always think they're Jesus.
Yes.
Like 9 times out of 10, whenever we're talking about a cult, someone thinks they're Jesus.
Right. And it's... Or they're the only one who can talk to Jesus. Or can talk to God. So it's a little bit different when you think you're actually God.
Yeah.
The goal of the Nation of Yahweh was to move Black Americans to Israel. They believed that Black people in general were the original Israelites. This seemed to stem from racism and the heightened racial tension of the 1970s. The civil rights movement brought issues of race and identity to the forefront, and many Black Americans were looking for spiritual and cultural affirmation in the wake of systemic oppression.
Yeah.
The group started...
And I kind of get it.
Right. It makes sense that this very specific group was looking for all of these things, this culture that they fit into, because, I mean, white people were not very accepting of Black people back then.
They weren't at all.
In the South, they've come a long way, but there's still some sundown towns all over the country. So we've come a long way, but there are still some that...
We still have a long way to go, too.
Right. Racism is very alive and well in America. But this group started just after 4 white Miami police officers were acquitted for the murder of a Black man named Arthur McDuffie.
I've heard of that case.
Violent protests were breaking out in the city, resulting in the deaths of 18 people. So tensions were really high in Miami at this time.
Yeah.
African Americans were intrigued by this group of people promoting community programs for education, self-sufficiency, and economic empowerment. Of course they were. He seemed like a great guy. The Nation of Yahweh provided members with a sense of community and identity that they didn't find elsewhere. Yahweh ben Yahweh saw the opportunity, and he preyed on a community that was looking for a place they belonged. He capitalized on the desire of Black Americans to be safe and have a future.
Right.
The main belief of the group is that Yahweh ben Yahweh is the true name of God, and his people, the African Americans, were the chosen people. Members of the Nation of Yahweh would choose new Hebrew names and focus on Hebrew practices so they could return to their spiritual roots. And by they, I mean all of African Americans, all Black people, could return to that spiritual root.
Bold of them to assume they all want to believe the same thing, though.
Right.
That's like all white people only being Christian, and that is not the case anymore.
This helped set a culture for the group, though, or at least that's what the members were told. That was their culture. They would have regular temple meetings filled with worship, and they dressed in white robes. Yahweh had a jeweled turban that he wore as a symbol that he was the leader. Followers had to wear white robes because because, and this is a quote from him, "He that overcometh the white man, the same shall be clothed in white raiment."
Okay, it's the 70s. Why are we talking like we're in biblical times?
He is God.
I know, but... Okay, I don't know, but you know what I mean.
Yes, I do.
There's no need to talk like that.
Well,
Woketh uppeth.
they also had to change their names because Yahweh said, "We are the white people's property as long as we keep their name."
I've heard that in other stories too, not necessarily any like culty stories, but
And I think
shedding
that,
your name.
Yeah, I think that stems back to whenever someone bought a slave, they took that slave owner's last name. I believe. I don't think they got to keep their names. But this had many followers changing their names to Israel, because that's where he preached they were from. Many members believe that Yahweh's teachings are filled with coded messages that only members understood. For example, he would use the word Azazel, that in Hebrew means scapegoat. But a former member has stated, he basically taught that in our own land, we'd have these goats that we would bring once a year and we'd kill them for the sins of Israel. But he took it further and he'd say, white people are the new goats. And he said that proof of a kill is to bring back the head of the Azazel. And we knew
So
that
they thought we were talking about goats, but we weren't talking about goats.
Right. He was referring white people were the goats. He went on to say, and we knew that the Azazel was not a goat because we weren't in our land with goats. The Azazel was the white man. So the language was coded, but we clearly understood what he meant, and he would say those kinds of things. He said ears and heads and all of that stuff.
So it has to be coded because he doesn't want somebody to record him and take it to the police. Because it's like, we are threatening, like systemically.
Well, in this former member, he's been very open about his experiences in the cult. So I believe that.
Yeah.
Members of the Nation of Yahweh lived in a commune known as the Temple of Love.
Why is it always of love?
I don't know.
The family of love, okay. It's never actually love.
It's not. It's never love.
No.
They had to, of course, give all of their money to the group and work to earn more money for Yahweh.
Yeah.
They would sell goods, especially Yahweh's brand of drinks and beauty products.
Okay.
The Nation of Yahweh would invest this money into real estate holdings, which were valued at $9 million in 1990.
Oh, my.
So this wasn't a small cult.
No.
But things weren't as great as they seemed on the inside of the cult. Yahweh ruled his followers with threats of violence and actual violence. Yahweh had chosen certain members to become bodyguards. These weren't just any bodyguards, though. They all had machetes that were used to intimidate members into compliance. Then there were the circumcisions.
Oh.
Every adult male who was loyal to the movement had to reveal their genitals to Yahweh. If they were not circumcised, Yahweh would perform the operation himself. Yeah, let that sink in. This man with no medical training.
You know, I'm honestly not even sure how I feel about circumcision on newborns in the hospital, let alone...
That's a controversial subject.
Right.
Yeah.
An adult?
Yeah. Like, he's just taking a scalpel, probably a knife, and just slicing the tip.
He doesn't have a scalpel.
Just the tip.
It's not funny.
It's not funny.
I'm uncomfortable.
That's why we joke. That's why we laugh.
It'd be hard to get through these if we didn't, but that is horrible.
It is. In addition to this violence, Yahweh would control every aspect of the members, from food to sleep to their sex lives. There was no concept of celibacy within the group, and Yahweh was having sex with his female followers.
Of course he was, because that's what we do in cults.
Male members were only allowed to have sex with their wives if they wanted to conceive, but Yahweh was having sex with any female he wanted to. Women inside the group were forced to partake in midwife classes. This is where Yahweh led women's genital exams. They also learned to give CPR to unborn children by having the women place their mouths on other women's genitals. He instructed them to do this to give CPR to unborn children.
That's not a thing.
That was a sick fantasy that he had. I mean, not that doing that is when you're consenting adults is sick. It is sick that he is coming up with that excuse to have women do that to each other when, like, forcing them to provide oral on each other.
Yeah, he's forcing them into cunnilingus whenever
Right.
they think, oh, this is how you would save an unborn baby.
Right. He's
That's what makes it wrong.
Yes.
Not the actual act, the non-consent.
Yes.
Consent is what matters. Consent and the knowledge of what you're doing.
Right.
Consent and education. Okay, sorry. That is wild.
Yeah.
Like, of all the things that he's done, it's like, okay, that's culty. Okay, we've heard that before. I
haven't heard that in any other sex cult. So.
No, and we've done a lot of research on sex cults.
Yeah.
It makes it seem like we want to join. That's not what I mean.
No.
I just mean it. There's a lot of them. But this is new.
I had to burp.
It's okay.
Members had a daily required donation of $10. If they failed to donate, they would be sent to the Room of Understanding. This was basically a torture room at the Temple of Love. Members would be there anywhere from 2 hours to 2 days, depending on the severity of their crime. Their quote-unquote crime. They would be forced onto their knees with their backs straight on a concrete floor with a thin layer of carpet. There were guards in the room that used sticks to ensure they stayed in the proper position. So they weren't beating them unless they used the sticks to beat them into the right position. But you had to sit straight up on your knees for hours or days on concrete. So this was just one of the ways the members were scared into complying with his rules of the compound.
Yeah. Not only is that torture in and of itself, it's also a key brainwashing tool.
Right. Along with controlling their sleep, controlling their food, controlling their sex lives.
Yeah. And their money.
Right. Leaving the group was no easy task. If a member left, they had to leave their family with the group and were not allowed to contact them in any way. The member that I talked about earlier who was giving these statements about his experiences, he had to leave his wife and kids because she didn't want to leave. So he left her and he wasn't allowed to speak with them or see his kids anymore. A small group of members started to question Yahweh and moved to a new temple. Yahweh was not pleased with this and labeled them as the hypocrites.
Oh, okay.
Yahweh called for the death of these former members. One of the men returned to the Temple of Love and demanded to speak to Yahweh, but he was just beaten with a hammer. The group decapitated him and discarded him into the Everglades.
Oh my gosh.
2 of the other members that left and went to the police about what was happening in the group. Coincidentally, they were attacked inside their home. One of the former members was killed and the other went into the witness protection program. While everyone knows Yahweh was responsible, no charges were ever brought forward for that attack.
Was he in with the police too?
No.
Or it was just you didn't have enough to go on?
I think it was, they couldn't prove. Like, they knew it was him, but they couldn't prove it.
It wouldn't surprise me if he had the police in his back pocket, though, so that's why I was asking.
Exactly.
Because those charismatic men, man,
and he had the mayor in his pocket, so
why wouldn't the police? But that's not something we found.
It was in 1990 that Yahweh landed on the FBI's desk. They spent weeks planning to raid the compound, and on November 7th of 1990, they proceeded to do so after receiving a tip. They went inside after they heard shouting and a flashbang grenade go off. The FBI, a hostage rescue team from Quantico, and local police agencies all gathered and went inside to gather evidence. They shockingly found no weapons inside the compound, but they were prepared in case they did. They also didn't find Yahweh, as he was at a hotel in New Orleans.
Of course he was.
The FBI apprehended him in his room peacefully. They actually called up to his room and informed him of the warrant for his arrest. Yahweh wrote a 200 plus page book about his arrest, which tells a different story of events. He stated that they burst into his hotel room and put weapons to his head, neck, heart, and other vital organs, even though he did not resist. This is likely to feed into the police brutality claims, although we'll never know what actually happened because we weren't there.
Right.
So it could have went either way. I'm given the two parties involved, because we do know police brutality is real and it happens.
Especially in that area at that time.
Right. But we also know Yahweh ben Yahweh. I'm going to side with the cops on this one.
And we don't say that often.
No. But I'm going to believe them. The FBI was not only arresting Yahweh, but 17 members of his cult were named in an indictment against him. At this point, Yahweh had temples in several other states and 20,000 members across the country. The FBI raided 7 other temples looking for all the members named. You're probably wondering what the charges were. Well, there were 18 counts of racketeering, including extortion and arson, and 14 murder charges.
Oh. I expected the racketeering. I expected a conspiracy in there, to be honest. Like conspiracy to commit or whatever. Wasn't actually expecting murder. I mean, I'm sure they did it, but I wasn't.
Yeah, I mean, anyone who opposed him, he sent his bodyguards out and they killed them.
Yeah, I'm just impressed they actually got charged with it.
Right. Yahweh had a 5-month-long trial that resulted in his, along with 6 other members, guilty conviction on conspiracy to commit murder.
Ah, there's the conspiracy charge.
Yahweh received 18 years in prison and had a $20,000 fine. But he was paroled in September of 2001. Only 5 years after his release, he was diagnosed with prostate cancer. He died in 2007 from this cancer. So even though he was paroled, he's still not around to cause any more trouble. The Nation of Yahweh is still an active group. There are not 20,000 members anymore, but they are still present. They vehemently deny any wrongdoing by Yahweh ben Yahweh and call his arrest the crucifixion.
Oh my gosh.
And part of a 25-year FBI practice of disrupting and discrediting Black organizations. The Nation of Yahweh is currently led by a council of elders and supposedly focuses on Black community service, education, and spiritual growth.
I hope.
There are still members who are committed to Yahweh ben Yahweh's teachings, but others are trying to modernize the cult. The Nation of Yahweh portrayed themselves as a community-focused group that was doing good for the Black community. While some of this was true, the treatment of members and anyone opposed to the group is more telling of who Yahweh ben Yahweh was. After looking past his public persona, we can all see that his brainwashing, torture, extortion, and ultimately murder is who he really was.
Yeah.
So let us know what you guys think about that. I had heard of the Nation of Yahweh, but I did not know about the sexual things. I
mean, most cults have SA riddled through it, but whenever, I watched that big, the People documentary about cults. I remember seeing this one, but I didn't remember all those details. I remembered Yahweh ben Yahweh.
Right.
And it being like a militia type.
Yes.
But I didn't remember.
I don't remember seeing that part in there either, because whenever I was researching, I found that I was like,
yeah, whenever you said they were practicing resuscitation, no.
No.
That was new information for me.
Yeah. So please be sure.
I really hope the cult isn't practicing that today.
Who knows?
I know.
I don't want to find out.
Me either. I'm not asking nobody.
If you made it to the end of the episode, make sure you leave a big knife emoji down in the comment section. Let us know what you think. Please don't forget to like this video and subscribe if you're watching over on YouTube. If you're listening on Apple or Spotify or wherever you listen to podcasts, please make sure you leave a rate and review.
And on Spotify, you can actually leave comments now too on episodes. It's a new feature. So if you're listening on Spotify, leave us a comment there. Make sure you guys head on over to TikTok and Instagram and give us a follow there at Spooky Sleuths Pod. We post videos there every day, and we go live from time to time to discuss different things. So make sure you guys check us out there. We're more active on TikTok than anywhere else. Anything else?
Nope.
And on that note, stay spooky, friends.